przechodzimy do naszego gościa specjalnego. Naszym gościem specjalnym jest profesor Whitney Hischier z Haas Business School w University of California, Berkeley, także jedna z najbardziej inspirujących instytucji naukowych, badawczych na świecie. Profesor Hischier specjalizuje się w teorii zarządzania, w zarządzaniu eksperymentalnym, w biznesie, także od tej strony przedstawi nam sprawę potencjału kobiet w technologiach. Please, the floor is yours.
Welcome everyone, and I'm thrilled to be here. I don't speak Polish, so I hope that that introduction was accurate and not over-exaggerated. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about women in high tech. And my background, as Bianca probably told you, is I'm a lecturer at the Haas School of Business at UC Berkeley. I think the most important thing you need to know about that is we were one of the hosts of the Top 500 program. And can I just get a show from our top 500 alumni in the room? Will you guys raise your hand? We have a fabulous, proud group. For those who aren't familiar with the program, the Ministry of Science and Technology sponsored 500 of your top scientists, entrepreneurs to come and spend 3 months with UC Berkeley and Stanford over the course of about 5 years. And I think it's a critical mass. It's made a fabulous shift, and it's inspired a lot of really amazing scientists, including a lot of women, to go further and develop their scientific discoveries into some commercializable businesses. So really exciting for that. So I want to talk with you a little bit about my perspective on women in high tech. As I mentioned, I teach in the business school at UC Berkeley, but my previous role, and something I still do quite a bit, is working with high tech companies to develop executive programs. I also teach all over the world, and I mentor a lot of young female entrepreneurs that go through our business program. We have about 40% of our classes are women. So this is a little bit about me, just for more perspective, because we Americans need to tell you all about ourselves. So when I'm not teaching, I'm traveling. I work with women all over the world. Actually, the top right is Dar al-Hekma College in Jeddah, and I know we have a president of from one of the universities in Saudi here today. So pleasure to meet you. I have kids, so I'm a working mom, and when I'm not working or with my kids, I'm a competitive dressage rider. It has the highest age of any Olympic sport. The 70 was the age of the last Japanese member for the team, so I'm hoping that in the next 30-some years, I'll get there. So here's the context. At the highest level, we live in what we call a VUCA world: volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. Every morning, I don't know about you, but I look at my BBC News app and my stomach gets a little bit of a knot, right? The news these days is generally more negative than positive, very complicated, very dynamic, right? And it ranges from pollution, that's Delhi. I was there last year when it won the wonderful award of the most polluted city in the world. We've got epidemics, drought. Where I'm from in California, we've had a 5-year very serious drought. We know that there are financial crises that will happen more frequently. We're currently seeing a softening of the economy in the Bay Area. And of course, you live in this. We've got some massive immigration issues due to instability in the Middle East. On top of that, technology both enables us, but it also makes our world more complicated, right? We've got cybersecurity challenges. We've got issues with mobility for employees that want to have access to all information all the time. And actually, the most popular master's program on the UC Berkeley campus right now is a program on big data and decision making, right? Because this is an area that everyone's trying to get their head around. We got access to lots and lots of data these days. But what do you do with it? How do you make the right decisions in this kind of world? Because what was useful yesterday may not be useful tomorrow. To make matters worse, and don't worry, the story gets better, we have a leadership crisis. So this is data from a World Economic Forum survey. 86% of the respondents said we have a leadership crisis on a global level. On a scale of 1 to 10, the highest in terms of trust of the leadership were charitable organizations, nonprofits. You can see business barely made half, and of course, government's pretty low. And I'd say that's probably true for the United States right now, too. And on top of that, the leadership skills that we need in this kind of VUCA, chaotic, highly technical, highly connected world are not ones that are easily possessed. We're not born with these. This is a little bit difficult to read, but I wanted to show it because I think these are interesting skills and a little different from what you normally see. This was created by the Institute for the Future. The Institute for the Future is a think tank near Stanford University, and this is by a fellow named Bob Johansen. And he wrote a book, and has written several, about the leadership skills needed to be successful in a global dynamic world. And if you read through these, what struck me is that a number of these are really what are required to be a mother, or what are required to run a team, to run a household, right? So we have to make sense of a lot of different events. We have to work across multiple dimensions. For many of you in academia, you're seeing you no longer just work in your field and your department, but you're collaborating with colleagues that you never did before. Biology, chemistry, engineering, someone in the business program. We have to understand how to work with people who aren't like us, right? People who aren't Polish, who aren't American. This may mean immersing ourselves in cultures that are very different from our own. And we need to work with them in a virtual way, right? So we're not in the same room, we're on different time zones, different languages. And to top it off, and I'll just highlight this one because I think it's so interesting, we have a cognitive load management problem. What I mean by that, we are hit by data and information all the time. 24/7, on our iPhone, on the TV, on the radio, feeds on social media, our email, it never stops. And it's easy to get overwhelmed, to get exhausted, to get depressed. How do you manage that when you're also managing a professional and a personal life together? Okay. I'm also wondering, too, if part of the challenge here, back to our leadership issue, is the fact that there are so few women in high leadership roles around the world. 14% in the top S&P companies, okay? 14%, then we make up 50% of the population. Again, this is a little tough to read, but the main thing to see here is that across multiple industries, women are a minority, particularly when it goes into more positions of leadership. If you read this from left to right, the green are executive positions. And the one we're most interested in is also, unfortunately, one of the smallest, which is tech. What you can see is, even if 30% of the workforce starts in tech, about half of that remains when you get to leadership roles. And this is a deeper dive into some of the companies we're all familiar with. Some have offices here. Google, Apple, Facebook, Yahoo, Microsoft. My theory is Yahoo is a little higher because they have a female CEO, but even she has caused problems by telling people they can't work from home. So the question here is this a pipeline problem or is it a culture problem? So we know that there are not as many women going into the sciences in most universities around the world, but that's changing. And particularly with initiatives like this, we see more women going into engineering and computer science. But even so, when you look at the pipeline, 450 executives were interviewed, and of those, 30% they just said they did not have a single female in leadership. 41% of women leave high tech, only 17% of men. Which gets us to the second problem. And I apologize for the slang, but we joke in Silicon Valley we have what's called a bro-grammer culture. Bro, boys at work, right? No room for women. So when women are generally interviewed, and there was a survey done of 716 women, the majority said that they left their jobs not because they didn't like the work, but because of the culture. The culture was just not supportive for how they wanted to work. Again, an eye chart, but I grabbed this from the Girls Code Fund website. It's not that different here in Poland. So we know in the EU there's going to be a shortage of good workers in IT, and women need to make up about half of those. We have nearly a million gap in the number of jobs versus people. In Europe, women occupy about 11% of leadership roles in tech. 16% of computer science degrees are women. I think that'll rise, again, based on programs like this. And in Europe, women make up less than 20% of employees in tech-based professions. I want to tell you a little bit about Silicon Valley because, well, we have a long history, and it's actually not particularly friendly to women. So this is Silicon Valley. It's a little different than perhaps most people think. If you haven't been to Silicon Valley, you think it expands one block, and on each end are Apple and Oracle and Cisco, and you can walk down and see Eric Schmidt and meet Jerry Yang and meet all the celebrities. So you can ask the top 500 group. It's actually not like that. It's about 100 miles around this bay, and it's a mess. There are companies everywhere. They're difficult to find, and it's not as though it's easy to just walk down the street and meet people. What you may not know is that Silicon Valley is actually the outgrowth of the Department of Defense in the US. So the United States government started building up Silicon Valley in the 1930s, and then more heavily in the 1940s in our technology efforts in World War II. So what ended up happening is a lot of the defense technology was converted into commercialization use. And from that, and I want you to notice something in all these pictures, we have a number of celebrated Nobel laureates for their technology around things like transistor radios. Gordon Moore from Intel. Fairchild was a semiconductor firm that then turned into one of the first venture capital firms. Of course, Steve Jobs and Wozniak, 1976. And more recently, and I know some of these guys, they're my peers, this is the PayPal mafia, or more graphically, all the original PayPal players that went on to make a lot of money and then start additional companies, including, as you saw in the last presentation from Google, Elon Musk from Tesla. But what do you notice about all these pictures? Not a single woman. We're trying to change that, and it's taking a very concerted effort. So how can we create successful women in this kind of environment? Well, I have a couple thoughts, because I teach in this space and because I mentor a number of young women. It is a pipeline issue, but it's also a culture issue. And for organizations, there are some very deliberate things that they can do to both encourage women to work there, keep them there, and help promote them. So the first thing is to formalize your hiring criteria. We all know that we hire people that we like, and generally we like people that look like us. They are physically like us, they're the same gender, we would like to go to the pub with that person. But if you formalize hiring criteria to be a little more objective based on the actual skill set, that takes away more of the superficial appearance. We need to train managers on bias. We're all victims of this. It's human nature. We stereotype, we make decisions, we make snap judgments. While we can't stop doing that, we can be aware of when it happens so that we're not biased against a different gender or people that don't have our background. We also need to understand what motivates people. Yes, money is a motivator, but for anyone that's read Dan Pink's work on Drive, it's about autonomy, mastery, and purpose. It's about having a sense that we are making the world a better place, along with making enough money to live okay. And every human needs that, male or female. We should tie how people are compensated to also how they promote diversity, right? So every manager should be held accountable to how they either promote diversity within their group or hire for it. We need to encourage collaboration and networking, and I want to spend a little more time on that because it's so important. When we see people who are like us, we think, hey, I can do that too. I see this with my female MBAs. There aren't many female faculty. I get a lot of the female MBAs that say, I want to talk to you because I don't see anyone here that I want to be like. Please tell me it is possible for me to start a company too. This isn't such an issue in Europe, but certainly in the US, we're pretty bad about paternity and maternity leave. And just to skip ahead, there's some data that when Google extended their maternity leave just from 12 to 18 weeks, they had an increase of 50% of women they retained after they went on maternity leave. Okay. And the final thing, and this is a big one for me the older I get, discourage FaceTime. It's not about how much time you spend in your desk or at your desk in the office. It's about what you get done. Measure on output, not on time. Because as every parent and family member knows, every minute you're spending in the office is time that you're not with your family. So a couple other things here just to show it is possible. Harvey Mudd, which is a technical university in the US, was able to raise the number of women from 18 to 40% in the sciences through deliberate promotional efforts and encouraging mentorship just like some of these programs here are doing. Harvard Business School, one of the most prestigious in the US, they were able to increase the top graduates in the class. They measure the top 5% based on their grades, and they were able to double that by making some focused, targeted efforts on women. So what we know is these things don't happen on their own. They require a lot of work, and they require a network to go with them. There's a lot of research about networks and the power of networks. And I know this is culturally specific, and when I've talked with my students from Poland, networking is a little bit uncomfortable, but here's what we do know based on actual sociological studies on networking. It helps. It helps you get a job, it helps you make more money, it helps you get promoted, and interestingly, it helps you have a better quality of life. You're able to balance things. Why? Because generally when you network, you're building relationships. This is a fun equation if you haven't seen it. This is sociologists trying to make math out of emotion. But basically, trust is the combination of building credibility, reliability, intimacy. I don't like that third word because it sounds a little strange, but it's basically about how we are able to relate to each other beyond just our professional work titles. What does this person do after work? What's their passion? What's their ultimate goal in life? Knowing that as a manager really helps you understand what motivates your employee. The most interesting thing here is the whole equation is divided by self-orientation, which means the more you see the world through yourself, the more everything is about you, the less people trust you. And I would add, interestingly and maybe controversially, women are trained to be low self-orientation. We're trained to help others from an early age, for better or for worse, but it actually helps to build trust. So my thesis is we're actually very good at networking. We need to do more. We need to work on it all the time. In the past, networks looked like that on the left. It was a closed clique. It was a club. Everyone was homogenous. It doesn't change much. It doesn't grow much. There's a high level of similarity. You can think about membership in an exclusive club or your graduating class from an elite program. What we see in Silicon Valley and what's really needed is this expansive entrepreneurial approach to networking. Never stop. Constantly meeting new people. When you leave today, use LinkedIn. LinkedIn's fabulous because you can actually see who knows other people in your network and continue with that. And you want to focus on the breadth, people that aren't just in your industry, the depth, getting to know some real experts, and also make it geographically expansive. Get out of Poland, meet people across Europe, Asia, the US. And then it starts to look like this and this. And if we don't do it, what happens? Well, I don't know about you, but I'm not keen to live in a Lord of the Flies environment. So best of luck to you. You're at the beginning of a long, ongoing journey, and this is a fantastic place to really start deepening your relationships, your networking, and your optimism and drive to build something great. Thank you.